Hello, everyone, and welcome to the next episode of First Five Live. I'm your host, ChaosTheory, and I am joined by my co-host, Phillycheaz, and
How's it going, guys?
also joined by our special guest this evening, Nick Conley, lead designer of Ashes Reborn. Nick,
Hey,
great to
thanks for
have you
having
on
me,
board,
guys.
man. Yeah,
Oh, it's great. I'm very excited.
yeah, for sure. This has kind of been a long time coming. I think we planned on doing this several weeks ago, and it's just been hard to schedule it. But
Yeah,
we're glad you're
Kept
here, man.
pushing it down the road. Next
we
week,
had some
next week, next week.
lovely late night Ashes discussion.
Heck
hmm
yeah. So, how are things? Tell us about your Ashes adventures right now. What do you got going on?
Oh, it's been fantastic, and I mean, Hope and Dimona just got released, and Team Covenant shipping those out now, so hopefully people will be getting those shortly. And
Yeah,
it's there's always a lot of good energy around the actual release date. I know people have seen the cards and we're even playing with them in tournaments already with Shuffle Bus, but there's always still something special about the official release, and people like getting the cards, and yeah, just a lot of good energy around that. And um, we do have a lot of more plans coming next week. You'll see some official announcements on Plaid Hat's page about just more support for Ashes and our plans for the present and the future with that. So, good time to be an Ashes fan. We got more stuff coming, and I'm sure we'll dig into a lot of that today.
for
It
sure.
is funny how exciting, excited I am always for the cards to be coming in physically too. Like I only play like online, but it's like there's still something about getting them in the mail and be like, I finally got them. I can use them if I wanted to.
Yeah, another deck of cards to put into sleeves. That's what I'm always excited about.
I'm checking with the lovely folks on YouTube because one of them
Uh,
said no audio. So I just want to make sure we don't have to
Oh man.
we don't have to do the intro all over again. Let me check my stream. No audio. Want to make sure. Nope. Okay, I can hear it on mine, so I think we're good there. I'm sorry
Hear it on mine as
for
well.
I
Are
don't
they
even know how to
pulling your
pronounce
leg?
your username. Reaf whatever your username is. Uh, you know. But yeah, so we got a crazy show, a lot of cool stuff to talk about. Before we do that though, before we get into like the Hope and Demona stuff and all that, let's talk about what we got going on in the community because we have the Shuffle Bus Spring Qualifier has started. Uh, in the original show notes, it had just started, but now we're well into it. We're into
The last round just
We're
got
nearing the
posted.
end,
yeah,
yeah.
this last round of pools, and so we can just talk about like what decks we brought and what the meta has been like and how things have been going. Bill, you want to kick us off? What do you got going on?
Yeah, sure. Well, I was bouncing around like tons of different decks, going into it, and then at the end, I was like, well, I haven't gotten as much testing as I wanted to, so I just like stuck with something I felt was good, and then tweaked it a little bit. So I just built on four book Aerodel, and then I really liked Fox, so I wanted to build around that, and then so incorporated Illusion with that. It hasn't done as well as I wish, but I mean, it's still fun, so I'm having a good time.
Nice,
Always
nice.
cool to see your innovations on Aerodel and what other ways you can explore that. That's cool.
hmm
Yeah, it's been like a ever evolving thing, and yeah, I decided to take Hope. Jesse allowed Hope and Demona to be legal since they were fully revealed and gonna be shipping soon. Oh, our viewer who was having audio issues is good now. That's good.
Oh,
Um,
good.
Perfect.
welcome, welcome. Uh, so I decided to bring Hope, and I made a deck that was focused on vampire bats and piercing light, which the first half of that has worked out tremendously.
That is a nasty build you have. we actually ended up playing in the first round, and I was like, yeah, I can't deal with the bats, and then dropped the piercing lights, like, and there goes the rest of my health.
Yeah, it was that was the first and only time that the piercing lights have worked out for me this tournament. I guess I don't know, maybe you were just that game went long. We played to
Yeah.
fatigue, which has honestly I think that was like the first time that's ever happened to me.
I think it was hilarious
wow.
too. I was like freaking out about like taking too long, and we're like, oh, we have 40 minutes left, or like 50
Yeah.
minutes left. We're fine.
Yeah, we'll be
And
fine.
inevitably, yeah, we went to time.
Yeah. I play fast decks pretty often. They're either like they're like mid-range at their slowest. So fatigue rarely is a problem for me. But that game was grindy. Uh but yeah, the Vampire Bat Hope list has worked out pretty well. I ended up going up against Jesse, we were both undefeated at the time, and his Odette. It was really nasty, and it was a very close game. Came down to just a few health, and he ended up pulling it out the win. And then I was up against JK 007, our local Brennan master, and that was my first time playing against the Brennan aggro thing, the Widow's Rush list, and I managed to hold on to with round one really well right into the very end, and made a very bad attack. It cost me the game.
Oh no.
It was rough, but yeah. So it's been pretty solid list so far. Nick, what have you brought to? Because you play in these tournaments too.
I do, yes. So
Not Orc
this
this
season,
time.
yeah, I'm off Auric. I was like, oh, I gotta shake it up a bit. But man, I could pick up that Auric deck any day and be happy. That's just been super fun, and I do have some innovations with it that I need to
Ooh.
test out a bit with. I want to try it with Dream Fracture since it's a very
Yes.
gates thrown open centric deck. I'm like, oh, maybe I can squeeze Dream Fracture in there, but at that point, over half the deck is ready spells, and that has its own set of issues. So it'll come back someday. It'll come back. But this season, I decided to play Cole. I pulled an old list that I had a while back, and it's actually one Jesse took to Shuffle Bus one season. Didn't have much success with it, but it was a deck design I had a while back that I was like, once Griffin's released, I'm ready to pull this one back out. So I dusted it off, and the idea of that deck is Ceresaurus mount as one of the main attackers for Cole. I really liked that with Cole because Swift Messenger is a super cool unit to mount. You can play it as a reaction on your opponent's turn and then mount it up and attack on your turn. So it's got a lot of velocity there, and the way Swift Messenger draws you a card unlocks Fester in your first 5, which is really nice, and just in general, slash material is good for Cole to have. And I also thought the way mounts add allies back into your hand is a good way to keep some gas in the tank for Cole. But I mean, even with that, I've just been ripping through my deck, and it's not been going well for me in this tournament. I was 0-4 until last night. I picked up a win, but so yeah, definitely a rough one. And I think I can pinpoint the issue to maybe being that these two major things. I have 2 books with a book tax on them in my first 5, which is pretty difficult to get away with how high tempo some of the new stuff is. That you got Realm Walker and Griffin, which are very efficient and very strong right away. That kind of punishes book tax like value conjurations that are playing for a longer game. So both Ceresaurus and Bear kind of get better the more times you can summon them, but Griffin kind of just is
comes out swinging
right away, ready to go. And then also like larger mid-range units weren't lining up well against some of the smaller units that I was running into, in addition to Griffin preying on both of my 3 life conjurations. So I'm just like so on the back foot with these units right from the get-go. But it's still been a really fun deck. I'm glad I brought this one. You can never really have a bad time with Cole, so it's fun.
Yeah, we were talking before this shuffle bus started about like, well, one actually like right after Griffin was revealed, there was two big takeaways. The first one was, oh, so three health dudes are in trouble. Like Bear and Ceresaurus and so on. And the other takeaway was ice trap value has skyrocketed. Both of
Yes.
these are terrible news for Ceresaurus Mount.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely. Yeah. Oh, geez. It's always a big scare bringing Ceresaurus in the first five, and I'm like, oh, can I get
yeah,
away with just one ally, or should I bring a Raptor as
right.
well?
I
Yeah,
never even thought of that with Ceresaurus being
it gets
an even
hit doubly.
harder
Yeah,
liability. Yeah.
I
yeah.
did have a very cool technique with Ceresaurus, I thought, in my game. I played against the treatments Noah yesterday or the day before,
Mm-hmm.
and I was
He's in the chat.
Yep.
we'll talk about our game. So that check this out. I was like, oh man, I don't know what to do about Shadow Target. I never know what to do about Shadow Target. So I was looking through my books and I'm like, man, it would feel really bad to pay a book tax for a bear and get it exhausted. And I kind of wrote Sarasaurus off for the same reason. But then I thought, I was like, oh wait, I got an idea. So I put my Raptor in play first, and then the next turn I put down the Ceresaurus book and mounted it up right away, so I didn't leave a book unexhausted for a
Oh, there you
turn.
go.
And
Yeah.
that was the only book I first five, so I was like, okay, I can at least get away with Shadow Target not hitting me, and
That's awesome.
it went fine for me. It was cool. It was a fun
Yeah.
game. Super well played by the treatment. Noah's Noah's still tough no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah, Nick Green is in the chat and said he crushed me. Well, yeah, so that's what we've been bringing, but there's a lot to talk about with the state of the meta right now. I think it's safe to say that it's kind of the Wild West right now, and there's a lot of untapped potential in these decks. Um, let's just talk about kind of like what's going on and what decks are being played. Like first up, Hope. I mean, I don't think any of us are surprised. Hope coming out of the gate very strong.
Mhm.
I I decided to take vampire bats over creepers. I think creepers was the big scare leading up to this season, and for a good reason. I think that creepers has a tremendous amount of value. But what I've kind of discovered over the course of this season is that um, like while you can get a ton of value with creepers, you're also a lot more all in on like status token synergy and like capitalizing on those seedlings and stuff.
Mhm.
Whereas vampire bats, they just won't die, and like then you summon another one with duplicate, and then you swing with group tactics, and they have group tactics two, or what? No, group
Yeah,
tactics one. That's what it is.
they
But
got one, but
they
start
become
at two.
like
Yeah.
three ones, which is crazy. It's so much tempo, like just
It's got to feel good being in a position where you just
yeah,
always can have something to
you
attack with, and
always have
they
them.
can't get rid of it.
A
Yeah,
huge threat.
And Hope is very good at attacking.
yeah,
Duplicate plus Void Pulses.
yeah.
That's the stuff right there. And yeah, Vampire Vat, you got it right on there. That's a strong one.
I I was like when I put it in the deck, it was kind of a late addition actually, and I was just like, well, I'm in the colors and it makes sense. But I didn't realize, like, I think I've spent, I don't even know. I should go back and check my games and see how many dice I spent just on the ability of Vampire Bat Swarm. It's kind of absurd.
That's
uh
great. And that's honestly really cool to hear. We can talk more about it when we dive into Hope stuff, but I like that there are some new conjurations getting their time in the sun just because of a new Phoenix born. That's pretty hard to do, to kind of flip the value of a conjuration just by the
mhm.
addition of other cards. So seeing things like the cricket and the vampire bat and creepers have always been pretty solid, but seeing them being used in a new way and on a smaller
Mhm.
battlefield too is pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely, there is tension there. I've noticed that with playing Hope. But yeah, we'll talk about Hope a little bit more later. Real quick, Killer Cactus is in the chat, Monk is in the chat, Shadowfire, lots of community members.
All right.
We're excited to see you all here.
And
yeah.
Nick Green had a question in the chat about Hope being too pushed. We do have a question down the road about that, so we'll get to that later on.
Yeah, any of the questions you post in the chat, like if they're something we are going to cover ahead of time, we'll let you know. And if not, then we'll try to squeeze them in after later on down the road in the interview.
Yeah, feel free to still ask questions though, and we'll answer them when we can get to them.
For sure. Yeah, so we also have another big showing this season has been Echo. I think we all kind of saw this coming too as the reveals kept happening. We're like, wow, these are really good cards in Echo. The Griffin, Realm Walker, Lightbringer just kind of coming together and doing a ton of work in that list. This is sort of the mid-range monster right now.
Yeah, Illusion, Divine Time being kind of this really well-developed dice type pairing. I mean, both these sets directly contributed to that, and it's cool that they released enough stuff to where it kind of really defines a mid-range deck that doesn't rely on Frostback Bear, I think.
Yeah.
So that's been pretty cool.
For sure.
Yeah, Echo Griffin really just felt like it built itself with the deck. It's like, oh, go Griffin, Lightbringer, and then Fox Spirit, or other people are running False Demon now with it. It's just like it just the starting point with that is just really solid, and then you
so
can just
many robust first fives.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And that's a deck that was well known in play testing and in kind of whatever variety that was. So we were definitely using that as kind of a good baseline deck to test other ideas against, because we're like, okay, this one's very clearly strong. It's cool to have another deck that feels up there with the best, and we can also test other ideas against that while still getting a feel for the new cards. So yeah, Echo Realm Walker has been a good one.
Yeah, for sure. We've seen a lot actually Cole, like you bringing Cole as well, but like there's a lot of Cole Wishing Wing stuff happening.
Oh, Brian's deck was so cool. That was my first round in Shuffle Bus this season. He just decimated me with it. But oh gosh, like it was just, it's always great getting blasted by Fighting Spirit. It was really good. And that was a good matchup that highlighted the weakness of my deck. Where I'm like, man, these big units hitting into little Wishing Wings that are just giving Cole more fuel is not working out well.
But the rate at which you accelerate and just burn through your deck is insane in these lists. Like, it is crazy how fast Cole can just blaze through all of his gas. Like, it's
I haven't played it much, but when I did, it's like you either win or die by the end of round 2, because you've just like poured through your whole deck at that point.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. It's really fun. And that, just right there, like, pretty cool that we're seeing like new Phoenixborn used and old ones, like seeing some play that hadn't gotten a lot of attention recently. Demona is seeing some play, not as much success immediately, but there's a Fallen build out there. I don't know a whole lot about it. Phil, what can you tell me about this Fallen Demona?
I was testing that a little bit, and it was one of my considerations for this Shuffle Bus, but I ultimately ended up not doing it because I just like bringing my own ideas for a list, and I think Carl was the one who had thought it up. So I was like, oh, that sounds like a really cool idea. So I built one. But it's like, oh, just when thinking of it, it's like, oh, but it wasn't my idea, so I want to bring something of my own. But I think it's a really strong deck. Like, it's a really cool like pick your poison of like, oh, I've attacked with this ally. Now you either kill it and give me falling tokens, or I mount it next turn. So
yeah,
sure. I really like that like aspect that it has there.
Yeah, sounds really good.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this hasn't been like a Shuffle Bus. I don't know how is Monk doing in Shuffle Bus. I wanted to bring up Monk's Auric deck. Did he bring that?
Yeah, I
Shuffle dice?
just put that in the show notes when Nick was talking about Orc, and that gave me little PTSD of my game with him. And then he was in the chat. But yeah, he's been like working on like it seems like different versions of his like control prison decks with Law of Fear for a while now, and he's got this Auric deck that's just like running wild. It
John
feels like
John says he's 3-2.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah,
3-2.
yeah. So this
3-2.
Auric
Hey,
deck is
that's
like,
fantastic.
we've talked a lot in the Discord about how the game is sped up and there's a lot of high tempo, a lot of very aggressive decks out there right now. And then you've got Monk just on the other side of the spectrum, just building these mill prison grindy Auric decks and getting some results and like really innovating, I think, a lot with the idea of control and Ashes, which is really cool.
You don't
Yeah,
realize
that's so
like
cool to see.
how hard Law of Fear is to push through until you're just on the other end with that.
Yeah.
Because he was literally just like, okay, I'm going to Law of Fear and then use Auric Concentration to turn up the snake dice. So then I put out a bear and he just puts a snake die on it so it can't attack for anything that round. It's like, okay, so I either don't attack or I attack into his Orchid Doves, which then just mill me. And
Yeah.
Hope
if
you
they
brought
go
a lot
through,
of
I'm just
burn.
doing one
Right.
damage each time anyway. So it's like,
Yeah. You have to have a ton of reach. And then also there's the whole like safeguard thing that he's been exploiting, which is really strong.
I was able to get past that, but in my game, but just barely. But then it just wiped my board, and then I just wasn't able to finish it off. It was a really tight game, really close, but it was pulled it off. And I was like, oh man, it was just a fun time.
Yeah, I mean that's a really good example for how a deck can get punished for going too far down one of the three avenues of victory, and how important it is to have those backup win conditions, because certain matchups will totally try and shut down one avenue of that, and
Yeah,
you got to get over another way.
for sure. That's that was my reasoning for putting Piercing Light in my list. And man, I'm like over here like, man, I really wish I could run into these monk lists everyone keeps talking about instead of JK and Aggro Mirror.
Yeah, Piercing Lights was kind of especially designed for that kind of matchup where the battlefield kind of grinds to a halt, but you still have a slight battlefield edge over them to where you can afford to lay down the Piercing Lights, do the divine buff things, and then get rewarded for it by crashing into stuff like Orchid Doves and whatever. The Piercing Light does kind of fall back a little bit when you're really duking it out, like mid-range unit for mid-range unit, knight for knight, stuff like that. It can be hard to have the room to put that down, but it definitely punishes a lower battlefield presence.
For sure. Yep, and of course there's still the old guard, the decks that have been good for a while now. Maoni's once again undefeated so far, I believe.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
I think so anyway. I think No Such Method won their last game. Brennan is doing really well. Harold is apparently in the running for a top cut placement as well. So yeah, I'm curious what you think, and this may be too much to get into. We have a lot to cover, but like, what do you think about Maoni with like all this high cut, or really just winning tournaments left and right?
She's just really strong, and it's a tough strategy to beat.
Yeah. Did you foresee this? Like, because Maoni got definitely some buffs, but also some nerfs in moving to Reborn, like with this limit 1 conjuration and stuff. But it doesn't seem like that really makes a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, with so many other things kind of lowering around it, Silver Snake really kind of stayed among the top amount of value you can get for a conjuration. I mean, 2 dice for 4 life is so good, and that uncapped attack potential is really, really dangerous. So But Maoni had a really rough time in 1.0, so it was definitely intentional to make her stronger and kind of
Mm.
lean into that play style. Like command strike is a much different take than her old strike ability, which was just more attack buff for like what the snake already is very capable of doing. So adding in command strike as this strong removal option that feeds into the snake was like a good synergy addition there. And I'm so glad there's only one silver snake, but it's even that one is proving to
Yeah.
be just among the best for sure.
You
How the
just can never kill the snake.
turntables.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's basically what the meta looks like, and I think next podcasts, by the time we get to that, I think we'll have the finals of SB7 will be uh, in the rearview mirror, and we'll be able to talk about it a little bit more and see like what all this came out to. But let's get into some questions for Nick, because that's why we're all here. So, Nick, let's kick things off with the softball questions.
All right.
When did you first start playing Ashes?
I started as a playtester for the master set when it first came out. I had been a fan of Plaid Hat games since they started. I found out about them through the fan website for HeroScape, heroscapers.com.
Oh, okay.
And that site was run by Colby, who was a huge HeroScape player and did some development work with Hasbro on that. He put, when he started Plaid Hat, he put a advertisement banner for Summoner Wars on that website, and that was kind of how I saw Plaid Hat right away. So I loved Summoner Wars. I played a ton of that, and that was going from like HeroScape to Summoner Wars was kind of one of my big kind of further introduction into hobby gaming. So I loved Plaid Hat for since its beginning, and them around that same time I was playing other like Fantasy Flight LCGs. I was big into Netrunner, and then the advertisement for Ashes came out and the playtest application was put out there, and I'm just like, oh, I would love to get into a game from the ground up. And I'd never done any play testing for a board game company at the time, and I was like, man, this just sounds so fun. I would love nothing more than to be able to work on this. So I put in my application as soon as I could. I was like, oh, I hope I get picked. I didn't know like how selective it would be or whatever. But yeah, so I started playing with the playtesting in the master set there, and gosh, that was just such a different time, and how little we all knew about Ashes during that was so funny. My like ultimate deck that I had came up with in deck building at the end of that cycle, I was like, I'm gonna put spiked armor on my living doll, and I'm just gonna have this big pokey thing that you can't do anything about. And like for a lot of reasons, that's not a good deck at all. But I wasn't even sure like how much deck building was like going to be possible. I was like, oh, these decks are like so well themed as they already are. I'm like, maybe you can like borrow a card here or there. But I mean, but look where we are now, and that deck building is wide open. It's a very different game. So it's been a fun, long journey with Ashes.
You must have not tested that against any Jessa decks then, I guess.
Yeah, I was like, oh, Fear. Yeah, Fear's pretty good.
Right. So I didn't realize that you actually started with the master set of the original Ashes and started playtesting or playing Summoner Wars 1.0. Your work on Summoner Wars 2.0 or second edition, right? As well.
Yeah, so I'm the lead playtester for that, and I do some development and design for the cards there too. But definitely Ashes, I'm way more in the driver's seat than on Summoner Wars. I kind of just connect the playtesting data to the rest of the Summoner Wars team.
Gotcha. So yeah, you've been in with Plaid Hat since the very beginning. That's really cool.
Yeah, it's super fun to be an actual employee now. It's just really a dream come true.
That's awesome, man.
Really cool.
So I was gonna ask like what kind of game design experience you had before Ashes, but I think you just answered that question. your first experience with doing this stuff was playtesting for 1.0, right?
Yeah, that would be my first kind of formal development experience. And but before that, I loved making like custom Heroescape cards, Pokemon cards. I was always like making up my own card games with no real rule set, but like I loved Pokemon cards. I loved Yu-Gi-Oh
Mhm.
cards. I loved all that stuff all the time and was always drawing and making my own cards like that. And I even have like some stuff I made from when I was like 7, just like these little pieces of paper. They're really funny. Just like reading what these ideas were
Yeah.
in my childhood mind. But yeah, making custom Heroescape cards would be like the first thing where I'm like, I love this core system of the game, and I'm playing it the right way, and I think I can make some custom ideas here. So I really have a love for developing within systems that already exist. So like the Ashes Reborn project was just so right up my alley of what my interests were.
Right.
Designing a game from the ground up and having that vision is like a whole different skill set that I don't have much experience with. But in terms of developing within these expandable systems, that's my cup of tea.
Yeah, for sure. Uh, so what was it like? I mean, having, you had this long history with Ashes, playtesting from the beginning, seeing it uh developed until the end and then dying off. And then I mean, I don't know the story of like when you found out this was coming back, when this was happening, but like what was it like for you to be asked to take the lead on this game that you know, that you loved from before, that was dead before, and you're the one tasked with bringing it back?
Oh man, it was it was so exciting. Because yeah, when I got the news from Isaac that uh, Ashes was going to be ending in 1.0, that was just it was really sad. It was a big passion project of his, and this was my I was lead playtester at the time, so I was like really trying to make this more than just a hobby to some degree there, and that was kind of my one foot in the door to the game design world. And I really didn't want to see the game go because we knew there was
Mhm.
still so much potential. But uh, those things happen, especially with these types of games. They do have a lifespan on them, but getting the opportunity was so cool. And that's just in huge part to Colby reacquiring Plaid Hat Games and
Mhm.
seeing that there was still potential in bringing back these card games that were successful and were so loved and just really weren't given the full opportunity that they could. So Ashes was a really unique one. The upgrade kit was such a bizarre thing that, to my knowledge, hasn't happened to any other game in quite the same scope. So yeah, I
That was
uh,
definitely something really cool to see. It's like, oh, you can use these old cards, but then here's all these new cards that you just mash in with it. Like,
Mhm.
yeah.
it's just mind blowing. It's like, wait, what?
Yeah. Was this was there any point in the discussion where like you guys were talking about perhaps just blanket refreshing the game and not redoing all these old cards and the upgrade kit and stuff?
um, I definitely thought about it and thought about if it would be necessary or if it would be so, like so useful to do that. And of course, I mean, I would love to do it again right now. I always want to go back and make every little thing as best as it can be, but that's not the way things work. We gotta just keep marching forward and just put out the best we can. But
What
no, what's that?
I was gonna say, what, you're not completely happy with massive growth?
Yeah, gosh, the one that got away. Oh man.
It is really interesting how, like, Jeremy, you brought up the not completely just resetting it when, like, then at the similar time, Flathead did like a Summoner Wars 2.0, and so just completely revamped that. So
Yeah,
just
that's
interesting, like the different roads they went there.
right. That's
Yeah,
what made me think about it.
I think a big part of it was Ashes was developed later and has a very refined look to it, and it seemed feasible to um, do it the way we did, and also that's an incredible benefit to the player base that really got their game taken away from them too soon, because everybody
right.
had their 1.0 collection still. So it seemed like a good opportunity to be like, hey, here's a really affordable, easy way to refresh your stuff and get back to playing the game that was cut short. Whereas Summoner Wars, older game, I don't fully know how far that one got in development, and I guess Colby just had a totally new vision for it. We definitely went with a new art style with the artist Martin Abel that Colby really jived with when we did Crystal Clans. So I think he had big pictures for it, and there's definitely more like system level changes that they did with Summoner Wars. The way deck building works with like the deck building symbols on those, and some major rules changes. It's definitely a good representation of like everything Colby has learned in game design and making it totally fresh and new and re-envisioned. But yeah, I'm super happy with how the Ashes Reborn project went, and but yeah, there's always those couple of changes. Where I'm like, man, if I had just done it that way, but that's okay.
Yeah, I mean, go ahead, Bill.
Oh, go ahead. No, you can go first.
Well, I was gonna say, like, I was listening to some of the TC podcasts. They've been doing interviews with developers and designers recently, and one of the things that Lucas Litzinger was talking about was just how you can never really catch everything. You're never done designing, you're never done tweaking, and like when stuff gets out in the wild, you just have to expect there's like a reasonable kind of scope for what like things you're saying, like this much stuff kind of going outside of our expected what anticipated results. That's fine. There's like a threshold though. But yeah, it seems like with card games that's just gonna happen. Like you're gonna have things that slip through and kind of are crazy.
Yeah, like, yeah. The reality is like just the volume of games that get played on release day is just going to be so much more than wherever, or like how many games got played in the final version of the cards that got put out. Because like Hope from version 1 versus Hope from version 13 or wherever we ended, like there's so much has changed in between there. So it's like the amount of total experience you have with the final product. Some cards have stayed the same for most of that lifespan, but specifically like the very final patch, there's only so much time we have to really play with that final stuff. And something that was said in the Lucas podcast you're talking about is just like if your internal team can solve that meta, then it's just not going to be a very exciting set for people. And the Hope is kind of a good example of that happening, where we didn't fully crack the code on Hope's power and all the different deck builds you can do. I played a lot of Hope in testing, and many of my decks were more centered around the 1 die cost conjurations, like your Salamander, Monk, Shadow Spirit, stuff like that. That's kind of just where my deck builds were going. I was like, these units are already pretty solid, and getting more of them, how could that be bad? And there's certainly good decks, and there's definitely strong aggro openings we tested with like the Raptor Herder, Duplicate the Raptor. Those things were definitely known. So, but the kind of the bigger surprise was how good the 2 dice conjurations that you can duplicate get when you're duplicating them for 1 die less. And it's when I say it that way, it's like, well, duh, it's half the cost. Of course they're gonna be good, but things like the Vampire Bat, the Creeper, the Cricket,
Yeah.
those were not the decks or the
Right.
conjurations that were like making the top cut deck. So it's like, oh, how much better could that really be? And in that sense, I think Hope is a really good success in that sense. It's like, oh wow,
Yeah.
there's a great reason to play these other cards that otherwise were kind of non-functional. And there's always that hope that like a card will come along that bring yeah.
Right. Yeah,
So
and
yeah, that's cool, I think.
that all that tells me is, when is someone gonna crack the code on Shadowhound Hope?
Oh yeah.
Yeah. If
One
two
die
deck
for 3
conjuration,
attack stock. Come
Yeah.
on.
And
two
do
deck
2
conjuration's
damage.
getting so much value by 1-cost duplicate, so then a 3-cost unit
Yeah.
getting
Super
another one.
value.
That you can't actually get rid of very easily before they
Yep.
duplicate it. We'll see. We'll see.
It could happen.
We got a couple of questions in chat. One is from the treatment Nick. It says, after Time Cycle comes out, any considerations on changes for the chain list? That was a question we were gonna have like later, sort of. We're gonna
Yeah, we have
ask you.
something like that coming up soon.
Yeah.
Carl also asked about War Within promo events. We also have some questions on organized play down the road, so
Yeah.
we'll put in a note for that to make sure we come back to that as well.
Yes.
Sorry, we're not.
It's on the
sorry,
list.
Edward. Yeah, we're looking at your questions. We're sorry we're not responding them quite in a regular order, but we have
Right.
them jotted down, so we will get to them when we do.
They're good questions. Yep.
So, moving away from your history with Ashes and the Reborn and everything, into the current meta, the current time. How do you feel about Widow's Rush? Because that's been a hot topic in the community for a little while now. Jesse from Shuffle Bus put up a video about, is this deck breaking the meta? And for a little while there, it seemed like Brennan was kind of unstoppable.
Mhm.
That hasn't quite been the case, but JK is still putting up insane results. Asterix has been doing stuff with this as well. These decks are really powerful, and it's kind of a direction that for a long time Ash's decks weren't really taking. Like, this kind of hyper aggro wasn't a thing. So what do you think about this and this development?
Yeah, Widow's Rush, it's a really powerful strategy for Brennan. And if we ever see it not be a powerful strategy, I think that might be room for concern in terms of power creeping, and kind of Maoni is lumped in the same thing where it's like, oh yeah, we see these strong decks still putting up good results, and I'm like, well, at least that's good. They're not getting shoved out of the way. I hope we're just adding more stuff to the roster. But specifically with Widow's Rush, it exploits a very vulnerable part of the game, which is turn 2, where you can have multiple units out, and you're swinging before your opponent can even summon their first conjuration, and getting a large percentage of your life total chipped away in that early moment can be really stressful to try and counterattack, and can be pretty unsatisfying for your game in that. And the chain list does have some additions on it that have specifically targeted similar things, like the way Exhortation is on there. It is kind of doing like these ridiculous sucker punches for huge amounts of damage before the game even develops. Hydra Rush was kind of the ultimate example of exploiting this early stages of the game with aggression, where it could win the game in round 1. That's way too soon for what we're looking for. So yeah. Widow's Rush definitely has some elements that resemble things that might be chain worthy. Spoilers, I'm not chaining Widows or Raptor or anything on what the Widow's Rush strategy is enabling right now. It could happen in the future if it continues to be an issue, but I think there's still some room for card pool developments to maybe handle this vulnerable spot, because but we already have some of them that are okay. Like you can use choke to stop the spirit burn. You can use Sunshield Sentry, which is a good way to push back multiple attackers like that. But even when you do that, the Brennan can respond with another thing that counters that. So you kind of play this back and forth game of the first 5, and everybody has done that preparing for your shuffle bus game, where I'll bring this, but if they bring that, I'll bring this, and they'll bring that. So
it always goes.
But what I do hope for is that new card designs can kind of have good early defensive qualities that can be used to match that same type of early aggressive quality. So when you are sitting across the table from a dice spread that kind of smells like a rush strategy, you at least have first 5 options that can still advance your gameplay, or just be a sturdy unit to put down that you don't feel like you're compromising having to include that. Stuff like Beast Tamer, Sunshield Sentry, or the way Raptor Herder can be used defensively to put out 2 blockers right away. We could have other kind of double units with a defensive angle to them, so they can't be used to create their own rush strategies.
Right.
So, that's kind of the design goal I have, to kind of respond to the way Widow's Rush works. And if it's not Widow's Rush, it's going to be Hope Rush. It's going to be something. So I think it's just always going to be a vulnerable state of the game. The chain list we can use to get rid of the most egregious versions of Rush, but I think it's okay that we have this very clearly defined hyper aggressive strategy, and as long as the players have some more tools to be able to go toe to toe with it, I think we could be all right. But I'm always open to looking at ways to use the chain list, or if we have to develop other types of organized play restrictions or rebalances or whatever. There's certainly more potential for that, but for now, it is what it is. It's okay for Brennan to be very strong. It's cool to see a new Phoenix Born kind of win Shuffle Bus, and that I think that's worth something.
I think you touched on it a little bit, but we also wanted to ask, like, what do you think of the current chain list that we have? Do you think how do you feel like that's going?
Yeah, so
something like that's been implemented before.
Yeah, I'm really happy with how the chain list works as a system. It's also really encouraging to still see the cards on the chain list being included in decks and being included successfully. We've seen Hydra. Yeah, Kyla's world champion Hydra deck, despite it being changed. It's like, that's really cool to see, because I didn't want the chain list to be a heavy-handed balancing tool. It's just to curate these opening experiences so people are getting the promised experience of what an Ashes game is, which is like a satisfying length where you can choose your opening first 5. You get to play the strategy you want, start off on your right foot, but there's still room to flex that first 5 and adjust for what you predict your opponent might be doing. So in that sense, I think it's been really successful. And next week, Plaid Hat is putting out a bunch of organized play updates. We got some tournament announcements, and there is going to be an update to the chain list. I won't say what cards are being added to it now. There's 3 additions to it, and I'd rather let my article speak for the reasoning behind all that, because I've already spent the time making sure I say what I want to say, so I don't want to trip on that right now. But
not Widows, we know that at least.
It's not Widows and it's not Raptor. So
all right, let's see if we can get it out of him.
Yeah, only 400 more cards to rule out.
It's not Temple Elder. It's not Blood Transfer. You know,
we're
the Meta
there.
Tyrants.
Right, makes sense.
So yeah, the additions to the chain list may or may not come as a surprise. They are cards that have been really popular or not really popular at all, or used in different ways. And I hope it's clear that the chain list isn't really used as just a metagame shakeup or a balancing thing. It's more about making sure the experience of each game of Ashes is authentic. So if a card is added to the chain list that is like incredibly niche and you're like, this card hasn't even won a tournament at all, it's like it's not for that specific reason. There's a lot of powerful cards that we could chain solely based on power level. Like if we chained Silver Snake, for example, it's like, okay, that would be a big meta shakeup. It would take Maoni basically out of the running, but that's not the point of the chain list. The Silver Snake is the expected strategy of how Maoni is supposed to function. So there's certain negative play experiences that I think the game will be healthier for not having to deal with. And whether or not those are super prevalent in the meta or could come back in a different meta, it's not really about their current prevalency or power. It's more just the experience.
We have a lot of speculation in chat.
I'm sure they got it.
Chat's all talking about banning Monk's favorite cards, like Neil and Law of Fear. I'm just laughing about it.
Banning Neil only for Monk. But that's really encouraging to hear, actually. I mean, there are, games that do use a ban and restricted list essentially as a way to shake up the meta, and love it or hate it, that's one approach to the game. But I'm kind of happy that that's not the approach you're taking with chainless.
That's where I think it can kind of become a slippery slope. Like if we take a card that is super prevalent and very strong, but not necessarily like creating super negative play experiences, like Salamander Monk, like the old standby. Everybody loves Salamander Monk.
Yeah.
So much of the game is hinged around like having that as an option, and you could take it away, and then maybe you gotta find a different replacement. But does the game experience change that much from removing that? Maybe not. So I think it's a different thing, and I also don't want to make additions to any kind of restricted list lightly, because every time you restrict a card, it's like that's somebody's favorite strategy or favorite card or whatever. So it's not without costs making these changes, but the goal is that it's at least an experiment worth doing, and that the community is on board with seeing how that change affects the game, and if it's better. And personally, for me, just deck building with the new chained list in playtesting has just been such a relief for me. It's taken away so much of the nonsense I don't like dealing with in Ashes, and that I think the end result will be a bit more freedom to explore the ideas you want, and we'll see how it shakes out in terms of the metagame, which is kind of its own different story.
Yeah,
it's really interesting to hear.
For sure. So let's move on to Demon and Hope, because they're the new hotness. So what is your design philosophy in Ashes, and more specifically talking about Demona and Hope? Like, how did you go about designing these Phoenixborn, and like what kind of elements were you trying to bring to the game that weren't there, and so on?
So we can start with Demona for this one. But one thing that I've really liked about reviving these promo Phoenixborn is that there's already a character design as like a restriction I get to work around, and that there's a very famous Mark Rosewater saying that restrictions breed creativity, and I totally agree with that, where it's like, okay, you have Demona to work with. What are the dice types for Demona? And you look at her and you're like, okay, well, it has to be time magic, and like clearly it will be divine magic. So that's another restriction. Okay, what do I want to do with this dice pairing? And I really like working with dual color decks and designs because you get to look for where they overlap and how they can support each other. So time and divine magic, both to me in like my color pie idea, they share fast attacking, which are things like side action summonings. You see that in
Yeah.
Light Swordsman and Time Hopper. So we have the Adept Duelist, which is another fast attacker like that. And Quick Strike is another thing that both of those types share. Again, with the Light Swordsman, and like Flash Strike has Quick Strike. So kind of seeing those overlapping thing. And that's where Griffin came from. You're like, oh, these
Yeah.
are both fast attacking dice types, and it would make sense for them to have a premium Quick Strike unit with its own kind of unique frail weaknesses.
Yeah.
And then just looking for just like other play artifacts that are really cool. The Divine Dice Power is just very inspiring to me as being a component you're using in a unique way, putting it on the cards. And it can do more than just what the dice power says. And it used to do more than that. Now it's just +1 attack, but before that it was like temporary damage prevention. So it was like, what else can the Divine Dice Power do? And that's where Piercing Light came from. And I hope to do even more cards like Piercing Light for the Divine Dice, and maybe even the Charm Dice too. Who knows? Charm development's still a ways away for the next set, but it will eventually come around. And I think there's a lot of fun to kind of souping up those dice powers. So that's kind of where Demona came from. Or some other thematic things with Demona was we also had the Wayward Knight that we had to work with. And the theme that had been presented for Demona was kind of just this massive, endless army. You see Wayward Knights invading all sorts of different towns. They kind of get owned in every piece of art, which is funny, but they're good.
It's very
Of,
funny.
like, each of the pieces of art on a playmat of the Wayward Knight
Yeah.
constantly losing.
They're the red-shirted ensigns of Ashes.
Yeah. But Wayward Knight was fun to come up with. And I was just talking about Demona with somebody the other day, and I was like, her old ability was really interesting. It was just a flat unexhaust, which is really powerful. And refresh effects are very appropriately pretty expensive in Ashes because you always have to account for the high end there. So like refresh is 2 dice. Demona's old ability was 2 dice. It's a really powerful thing to be able to do. And I didn't want to just port that over to this Demona. Just because it kind of trends towards exploiting it more than using it in a cool way where it's like, oh, I want to refresh my massive growth unit or whatever.
Right, yeah.
Or refresh my 3-eyed owl to get you again. It's like those aren't like, that's not what Demona's doing. So that's kind of where Promote came from. I was like, oh, we can still do a 2 basic refresh effect, but it was also cool to bring back mounts in a different way. Because the way the old mounts work is you want to mount up the cheap allies with enter play effects so you get their value and it's cheap and you're tucking them under, yada yada. But Promote is a totally different way to play with the mount mechanics, and it resembles the refresh mechanic that Demona used to have. So that was a design that I was really excited about its implementation. And I think the Empyrean mount is so cool, and it gives you those really cool gameplay experiences of like, oh man, do I really want to deal with that exhausted ally? Kind of what Phil, you were talking about with the Demona Fallen deck list. It's just like you're putting these forks where it's like, oh man, that's just difficult. And it really gives Demona this kind of commanding battlefield warlord presence.
Yeah.
So that's been cool.
But the one thing with that, I'm sure is on everyone's mind is like, why isn't it a dragon mount?
It's
on
just
literally
not right.
Everyone's mind. I'm pointing at myself right now.
Sometimes if everyone expects you to go one way, you gotta go the other way. And I also wanted it to look a little bit more like you have the Wayward Knight, they're on the horse. So it's like, oh, here's like a super Wayward Knight. So that was cool. And
right.
And
yeah,
I also like that Demona has kind of like this holy white kind of look to her, but she's really like a super cold, ruthless character on the inside, which is cool. But a dragon would totally be cool too.
The juxtaposition is nice there with the theme, and
dragon would probably take away from it slightly too. So
Yeah,
I think it did
it's
go in the right direction there.
Mm-hmm.
for sure.
She needs to have the illusion for her entire Rayward nation that she is
Upstanding and
yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
honorable, so on.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to be clear, I think Empyrean Mount is really, really freaking cool. Like,
Yeah.
For
and
sure, for
one
sure.
of the best
Just had
art
to get
in the
it.
game too. But so yeah, that was working on Demona, and that actually kind of led into a different question I was going to ask. Was like Demona, Auric, Lulu, Jericho. These are all redesign Phoenixborn. Like they're not
Mm-hmm.
original character concepts. So how does the design process differ for these four compared to, and I'm sure we'll talk more about Hope here in a second, but like compared to like building a Phoenixborn from the ground up?
It's a really fun experience. I wish there were more characters that I could make decks for. Just kind of the way I kind of described that process of working with whatever that restriction is, where it's like, okay, Auric
Mhm.
needs something, go figure out what that is. That's a really fun design puzzle for me. But when you don't have that starting point,
Mhm.
placing the starting point becomes its own entire thing where it's like, okay, now you have time illusion to work with. Okay, well, who even is that? And
Right.
coming up with a character is it it's a different type of design exercise, but I'm super happy with how Hope turned out as a character and kind of the theme of that whole deck. And it was a dice pairing that I was not excited about, frankly, because
Mhm.
illusion was kind of the uh, the lowest dice type coming out of the upgrade kit, and just being like, oh
Right.
man, I don't even know like what direction to take illusion to support it, and
Mhm.
it was really difficult back in 1.0. I don't want to go back in that direction, so kind of recarving out that space, and illusion also kind of having this reactive speed nature to it, which pairs really well with time magic, and they have a lot of parallel costs. But designing reaction spells is also like a very tricky card type to get right.
Mhm.
So the more proactive, straightforward types like natural and divine are pretty easy to just make. Okay, cool, big units, those are
Right.
great. But it's like, okay, what do you do when you're going for the more deceptive, tricky types of cards? Those are
Mhm.
really harder to see where their value is. But at the time Hope was being uh envisioned, there was kind of a call for Swarm to be a bit more of a supported archetype, and the way one life units are very vulnerable to nature in
Mhm.
particular, but just ping damage in general is like, it's just really hard to get the full utility out of these more frail conjurations. And um, I thought Duplicate was a great way to support that, and it's a good thematic connection between time magic and illusion magic, which has this sense of like, oh, is this one real? Is that one real? How many of them? So it kind of has this
Yeah.
duplicitous attitude to it. So it was a good time to jump in and try and support Swarm in that way. So that's kind of where Duplicate came from, and that I think that was Hope's ability right from the beginning, if I'm not mistaken.
Oh wow.
I can't really remember a Hope before that. I can't remember when Void Pulse came along there, but
Yeah.
tough to say. Tough to
It
say.
was always like duplicating one life units and just like going for that swarm aspect.
Yeah, yeah, that was the core idea there. So it's like,
Mhm.
okay, let's get
That's cool.
a bunch of one life conjurations there, and we'll figure out how to make swarming with little units effective. And it sure is
It
now,
sure
isn't
is. Yeah, it
it?
is.
Yeah.
And it plays
So
along really well with like previous illusion cards, the Shadow Hounds and the Shadow Spirits and so on.
yeah,
Rose Fire Dancer.
yeah,
There.
illusion has always had that one life uh kind of
Mhm.
theme to it. Secret
Mhm.
Door is another one where like, oh,
Yeah.
these small units getting through. So it's like there's a lot more we can do with that. It's clear that that was a unit type that
Mhm.
had more to explore. And
Yeah.
Double Down being another one where it's like, oh, you want to remove these,
Right.
really easy to do. Well, now it's the complete opposite.
Did you feel did you feel any like pressure to like make Illusion better? Because I mean, it was, from what I understand anyway, of 1.0. I didn't place a ton of 1.0, but like Illusion was a monstrosity for most people in 1.0.
That is correct.
Yeah, and then it became like, for a long time in Reborn, was considered the weakest magic type. That's because no one knew what False Demon was, and they didn't read the card. No, but
That way, Rin's not popular either. They
Yeah.
just haven't read his card.
yeah, they just haven't read his card.
Free ice buff. It's so
Free.
good, right?
It's free. I had to get my False Demon dig in. But I mean, but was there a pressure to like make Illusion good, but then you're like worried, oh man, I don't want to like repeat mistakes before, or what?
Yeah, so I was like, I definitely can't put Illusion back to what it was. I mean, it was very clear from the beginning that dice recursion and dice exhaustion were not going to be a part of Ashes Reborn. So Illusion was definitely left with a big gap in terms of like what its slice of the color pie was. And the dice power had changed to spin down, and that definitely has some utility, but the dice power itself can be tricky to make worth cost a die. And Shadow Spirit has kind of its own frailness as a 2/1. 2/1 is a very exposed stat line. You kind of overpay for this thing that's very easy to remove for cheaper. But anyways, with spin down, I was like, I think there's more room to explore that. And that's kind of where some of the ideas of Keepsake came from. And I thought that was a cute way to give a nod to Victoria, and also give like this little story connection to Hope and Victoria being friends from the past. Or maybe that's not even real because it's the time Illusion Phoenix born. So maybe this is just a simulation of,
oh wow,
they're in battle, but now it's them as children. Who knows?
I hadn't even gone that far deep into the rabbit hole. That is crazy. Yeah, I love Keepsake though. That's probably one of my favorite cards in the set, like thematically, and like the way that it buffs Vicky and everything. It's really cool.
Yeah, that was a really fun one. I hope the Victoria fans out there, because I know there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
I felt like I did them dirty with Surprise, but I still think Surprise is pretty cool. And at the very least, here's a nice little keepsake for you to buff up those decks. And it's pretty strong when you do it.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
And Dreamlock Mage was another big spin down card to come out of the set. Just I was more aggressive with putting out powerful stat lines on double class cost units. That's another thing that kind of became clear in Reborn playing, is the paying 2 class dice for something like Pain Shaman. It's like, these are good units, but like people aren't playing them, and it's because that dice cost really can make them clunky in your hand. So I was like, I think we can safely say that we can put premium stats on these allies. And in general, the 2 cost slot was something I was really big on supporting around this time, and still really like, because there's lots of good 1 dice units. There's a lot of good 3 dice units like Knights and stuff like that. But the 2 cost slot, that's something I always have found myself first 5ing. I'm like, okay, I got my 4 cards and 2 dice left. I just need something that fits right in there well. So Dreamlock Mage was kind of an idea there, just making a nice 2/3 unit with this repeatable threatening effect. I was like, okay, how far can we push spin down? What if it's unlimited?
Yeah.
To some degree. It used to be able to just spin everything down, and it was like, you're giving me 8 basic dice in a round. This is terrible to face against. But specifically targeting the power dice gives it that right amount of edge against meditating and reactions and dice powers and all that stuff.
Yeah, and it's it's the reaction color, so putting a counter to reactions in it, like, that's just classic, fight fire with fire type of thing.
Gosh, that pops up in Ashes all the time.
It does all the time.
I swear it's not intentional. It's just something about the way the design
Yeah.
works. It's like these cards always seem to counter themselves in one way or another.
For sure. Now, so like I think in general the community has loved Hope. Like I think for the very first new Phoenixborn of Ashes Reborn, I think people love to see them. Like they are super exciting. They're doing something no other Phoenixborn has done. They're clearly powerful. Um, but there has been a little bit of concern about like, a pushed power level with Hope. And so did you anticipate this, like them being this powerful in the community's perception? And what was like playtesting Hope? Like did you see this in playtesting and so on?
Yeah, Hope definitely seemed to have a stronger first impression on everybody than I was expecting. I knew I wanted Hope to be like, here's a premier swarm Phoenixborn. This strategy seems underrepresented and really needs a good Phoenixborn to kind of carry the torch for that. So it was definitely intentional to make Hope strong and support something that at the time was underrepresented. I don't know if that's necessarily the case anymore.
The timing
But
on it was just so funny because right as Hope is being fully revealed, you've got this Brennan aggro list that's
yeah, I was like,
doing
oh my
similar.
gosh.
I mean, it's just like the worst
Let's
timing
just add
possible.
more aggro.
Yeah, so it was like, yeah, I was designing Hope, and it's like, okay, yeah, Raptor Herder is a great card in Hope. What's the big deal? Raptor Herder is good in all sorts of decks. It's like,
Right.
that's not Hope's fault. It's just the way Raptor Herder is right now.
Raptor Herder doing Raptor Herder things.
Right.
And uh, all the Hope decks I was playing, like I was having some decent success with them, but I don't think I really cracked the code the way the community has on those 2 dice conjurations and really getting the max value from there. So I definitely wanted Hope to be strong. I definitely wanted to encourage a new archetype, and I think all of that has happened. We're still in our first tournament season with Hope, so we'll see how successful they are against the gauntlet of all the other strong decks that are out there, and we're starting to see a bit more repeat plays with some of the more successful decks. So I think the jury might still be out a little bit in terms of where Hope sits in that power level. But yeah, it's no doubt. You play that first game against Hope Creepers, and you're just getting like blasted with your standard deck, and I hope it encourages people to think about different first fives. And we have this new era of aggressive rush opening Phoenixborn, and it's like, what's your first five going to be against that? You might not be able to just bring your standard book suite and deploy those units main action after main action. It's like, with it, maybe the other tricks have to be in there. You got to think about reaction spells. You got to think about allies. It's I'm happy it's having an impact in the meta, because it's exciting to see how people respond and what tools we can pull out and what conventions of the game need to change, and that's good. And
nobody wants your brand new Phoenixborn that they just get in the mail to be just okay. You want them to be really cool. You want them to do fun, cool, powerful stuff. So
it's fun to push the limit and see how far you can go. And maybe 1 or 2 numbers are over the top a little bit. Maybe Hope could have had -1 life, or maybe didn't need to draw 2 cards and spin down 2 dice on Void Pulse. It's like, you could maybe tone down those little things, but like the general concept of Hope, I think is really delivering, and that was cool. I thought Demona was going to be the really popular one kind of throughout the playtesting cycle, because it was like it was very clear that all those units were like strong and good at what they're doing, but Hope was like the real kind of paradigm shift, and really has shaken up how Ashes is being played right now, and that's exciting to see as kind of my first new character to the roster. I didn't know how it was going to go over.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, sometimes you gotta like push that envelope, see how far you can make it, to like how much stuff can I add to it before it's just too much.
Yeah. And from my experience anyway, playing with, I mean, admittedly an unoptimized version of this list, but playing with a Hope deck in the first tournament and getting some reasonable success with it, there are some pretty significant like drawbacks you have to play around with Hope. That uh, even like I put 3 blood chains in my deck, thinking like, okay, that should probably be enough clear for my battlefield clog, and it's
Mhm.
not at all. And then another thing was like I thought uh Salamander Monk would be a card I'd want to be in here because look at the value, you summon
Yeah.
and you get the spirit and everything, but it ends up being like actually problematic, and I find myself wanting to run Ancestor Spirit instead, which is just that's wild to me. I never would have thought I want to
Right.
run
Yeah.
Ancestor Spirit over Salamander Monk. That's just been like people have tried
That's
that
insane.
before.
Yeah. Well, what a
Uh,
world we live
You
in where
know?
cricket and ancestor spirit are more desirable than a salamander monk. So,
Yeah.
it. I think that's a good thing
Yeah.
overall.
For sure. There's still a lot to figure out with Hope, I think, on
Hmm.
both in terms of maximizing their power and also in terms of fighting against them. I think there's a lot still to learn.
Yeah. Yeah. And the playtest team and me developing cards is like we got our hand on the pulse on those, and we're aware of what the game has kind of started to evolve to, and we can try and add tools as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. Uh, so I mean, those were all the really hot topic questions. We do have a couple of like, quick fire questions here at the
Quick
end.
hit questions.
Uh,
Sure.
what's your favorite card from each of these decks?
From Demona, it's got to be Piercing Light. I think it's
Mm,
just the straight up coolest one. I know it's been difficult for people to get a little bit of success with it, but man, when it fires off, you're like, yeah, it's just it's just cool. You can't deny that.
it's very
Yeah,
unique. Like,
Yeah.
it's definitely like the one that you see. It's like I want to try to build a deck around for this. Like I don't know how to
Mhm.
do it, but I just want to try to make it work.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, there's not a lot of, I mean, there's not a lot of static effects in the game, like just static
Hmm.
buffs across the board, things that just persist. So,
Hmm.
it's
Yeah, that's the unique design.
very, very unique. So what about Hope?
Favorite card in Hope, it's got to be Wishing Wing.
Mm,
It was so funny seeing people's impression of that card. Just being like, man, can like a 0/1 that you have to work to make a 1/1 and draws you a card? Like, could that be any good? But I felt that it was the the final piece to kind of coalesce all of this status token time magic stuff
mhm.
together, and it really makes a lot of other strong cards that haven't quite had the vehicle to get them uh operating like totally well. So it's like having a unit that puts a status token on itself double dips on the benefit of more status tokens. It's like there's
Yeah.
just tremendous value behind this one really innocuous card. So I'm glad Brian totally stomped me with them, and I'm like, yeah, Wishing Wing's awesome.
Yeah. And it's a bird.
It is really cool to
Yeah.
me too, where how like you had we didn't really have like really strong, in my opinion, like time units before this set,
Hmm.
and like
Hmm.
you brought in a great like 1 die unit with Wishing Wing. You got the 2 die unit with Griffin, and then you even have a 3 die with Realm Walker too. So it's like you that these two sets like really helped flesh out like time as a die type to want to use and run more often too.
Yeah, and but we kind of knew that was going to happen with time magic cards. It's going to take several
Yeah.
sets to just get enough cards to have it play well with enough different dice types to feel like it's there. But yeah, it really has kind of felt like it has turned the corner, time magic with this set.
For sure.
I think I know your answer to this question already, but who do you think is the best Phoenixborn?
The best Phoenix Born, strongest Phoenix Born. there's a lot that are right up there. I mean, Odette is super powerful, has a free ability, and Sword of Virtue is very flexible. But ultimately, I think Odette is pretty fair.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Brennan has that like same amount of just super pressure on the life total that you always have to respect, but it's got to go to Maoni. I mean, the Silver Snake results don't lie, and if you play a game against a well piloted Silver Snake, it's just brutal.
Yeah, for sure. Who do you think is the most underplayed?
Most underplayed? Oh man, I honestly don't think Jessa gets enough play.
She doesn't.
Fair.
She really
For
doesn't.
how powerful Jessa is, I don't think she gets enough play. And not that she's not popular or understood to be well, but I think she should be way up there.
Yeah, you're right. She should have 5 battlefield.
Yeah, she should.
You should still be free.
Upgrade kit 3.
Yeah,
No, R2. I
yeah.
mean,
What was I thinking? I got rid of
3.0.
all this.
We got some chat questions here.
All right.
So Corey's asking, can you speak to the newer? He said, speaking about newer Phoenix Borns, can you talk a little bit about the newer ones, since Rowan's ability feels a lot like Jericho's old ability? How much are you willing to talk about Rowan at this point? Because that's pretty fresh.
Yeah, brand new announcement. But we could talk a little bit about Rowan. Rowan's precon is, I would say, by far my favorite one from the time cycle. There's just so many fun things in there that I'm really excited how they turned out. Rowan's ability is a really cool one. It is similar to old Jericho, kind of this 2-part ability based around tucking cards underneath there. And I hadn't even made that comparison to them, but there is there are kind of like thematic connections between Rowan and Jericho that I've been going for with that set, where Jericho's kind of like the legendary hero of Ashes that reset the timeline to give all the Phoenixborn another chance to come up with another solution and hopefully not destroy each other again because of the guilt she felt at the end of it. She realized, this is not worth it. Let's do it a different way if we can. So Jericho's very much like the protagonist of Ashes, and Rowan is like going to be the complete opposite of that, where I talk a lot more about his backstory and lore on the Plaid Hat podcast that'll be coming out next week. But
okay, cool.
I'm really really excited for how his ability works, and it's one of those ones where it doesn't really do anything itself, but all of its excitement comes with what cards you decide to pair with it. It's double dipping on those interplay and destruction effects from those allies, and in addition, allies being destroyed creates benefits for cards like Chant of Revenge, and I really love Chants as a card design, so Rowan's going to be packing a couple more of those, which is fun. I love where Ceremonial is going. That's always been my favorite Magic type, and I hope it's getting enough support to where it really becomes its own identity with some things that no other Magic type is doing.
I think there were a few people who were suspecting more chance synergy stuff with that ability coming out. And I think that the community has been really excited about, I mean, without even knowing what the heck a red raindrop does. Like we don't know what a red raindrop does. Like there's some like lore implications there that probably lead us one way. But without even knowing what that does and what Discovery his signature card does, people are very excited, and they're already theory crafting like cool ways to use the conscript, and exhume. So that's really cool.
Yeah, that's cool to see. I'm glad people are excited about it. And yeah, you gotta go along on the Discovery journey with the preview articles to see what Discovery will lead you to. But red raindrops are really cool. I won't say exactly what they do, but they exemplify another mechanical theme that I wanted to explore with Rowan, which is end of round effects. So Rowan's deck has
okay.
a lot of those, and I thought that had a really cool finality to it, where this is the end of the time cycle, and Rowan is the last new Phoenixborn to come out at this time, and time magic, of course, it has like the fast stuff and everything, but it also has like this grand scope of like the end. So I really like these end of round effects, and red raindrops have a pretty cool one that activates at the end of the round.
That's kind of cool, like for like yeah, time and ceremonial. It's kind of like a end around makes me think like a doomsday kind of thing.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
like, oh
yeah.
yeah, this end is like the finality, the end of this. So
Yeah, it's totally
that's
got that kind of, yeah, doomsday
Rowan's got
ultimate.
apocalyptic vibes all over the
yeah.
place. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's just a fun deck. I really
That's awesome. John is asking, Griffin feels well above the power curve. Was that intentional?
definitely designed it to be really strong. Two class allies, or not allies, but two class units are able to have like that one extra stat point that makes them really good. I personally don't think Griffin is too far above the curve right now. It's definitely cementing Divine and Time as a good pairing for a while, and but we have Ice Trap as one solution to it right now, but of course that's not like the only way to do it. But Griffin's vulnerability will continue to lie in the fact that one die for 2 damage can trade up against it effectively. So it does have that weak point for any other damage effects. And so something that did come out in playtesting quite a bit that was really interesting. The way Illusion had a lot of these 2-1 units, especially like in Hope, it was like, oh, these 2-1s are suddenly trading up against stuff like Griffin. It made these smaller units have this really good target to go after, because 2-1s have really struggled to kind of have a solid role. They are really bad into 1-1s. They don't do enough into 3 life, but the fact and 2-2s are just pretty uncommon for the most part. We don't have a lot of 2-2s. We have basically 0 1-2s as far as I can think right now. I think you could maybe say Rayward Recruit is kind of like a 1-2, but by and large
Sword
that
of
stat
Ruby
line
Cobra.
is
We had a
yeah,
lot
yeah,
in
sort of.
1.0, but yeah, not really any in
Yeah, nerfing down the thing, the like Gilder and the Three-Eyed Owl from 1-2 to 0-2, like that's just been a difficult stat distribution for me to find how to cost it correctly and also have the right design for it. But yeah, Griffin is kind of it introduces the 3-2 stat line, which yeah is uniquely vulnerable to the 2-1s. So I really like that aspect about it. But it's hard to get the upper edge against Griffin if you're playing bigger, slower conjurations like Frostback Baron. Yeah, that was certainly intentional, but it's not without its weak points.
Yeah. We had some questions we wrote down from earlier. One of them was talking about organized play and the potential of another War Within, which if no one's familiar with that, anyone who's new to like Reborn, that was an event in 1.0 where the community got to decide the direction of a card design through some organized play events. Do you foresee anything like that happening again as COVID restrictions are starting to lift up a little bit and maybe people start doing tournaments in person and so on, or even online?
Yeah, so
what are you thinking for organized play? Do you know? Have any
yeah,
ideas?
so we'll have an announcement that's kind of introducing the start of our new organized play direction, and we certainly don't have all the information to put out with the update you'll see next week, but it's hopefully the start of more information to come. So I think we are definitely able to do more online events. AshCon was a really big success that we did last year, and I think doing more of those and more things like that is really feasible. And we also are getting more prize support manufactured and getting that ready in preparation for eventually when the prizes that we do have will become old, and we need to keep refreshing that with new exciting stuff. So
Mhm.
I definitely think there's possibility to add some kind of voting element or side choosing like we did with War Within in something like AshCon. It could even be done with like I'm just brainstorming right now, but like we could with a pair of Phoenixborn release, like everybody picks a Phoenixborn side, and the ultimate or like the overall win rate of that specific Phoenixborn pairing as they match up against each other over and over. So like we could even maybe do that with like Tristan and Rowan, where it's like you pick Tristan and you pick Rowan, and the end result of that could have some sort of
Okay, yeah.
influence on what prizes come later, or it's a bit hard to make any kind of promise on it affecting design just because so
Right.
many factors go into being like what can a card be. But the War Within was really fun and really exciting to see, and I think even stronger implementation of it and foresight could yield some pretty fun results.
Cool.
Thinking on
Yeah.
back like how War Within was, it probably is just like it would be like too hard to do to like say, oh, here's these two potential options, and then you're playtesting them both at the same time, but then only one ever like actually happens. So then you put all that time into another identity that just never even happens.
Yeah,
Mm.
that's a little odd.
Yeah.
But it's a cool idea, and
Yeah,
seeing
for sure.
something disappear forever has its own level of heartbreak.
Yeah.
That's funny.
That's true.
It's kind of cool. I mean, it gives it. I only have ever heard about this secondhand, but it gives me kind of like old L5R vibes where these events, these tournaments and stuff would affect the lore, which then informed the design direction of the game. So it wasn't exactly like,
Yeah.
you're picking two designs, but it might have implications on like what's coming.
Mm-hmm.
But Nick Green had a couple of questions here. Let's see. We'll try to get to all of them here. What community idea has piqued your interest the most that you'd consider for future expansions or rules update? That's a cool question.
Community idea?
Yeah, just
like
something
a
you've
card
seen,
design or
Yeah, it seemed like kind of a broad question. So
it is
I'm
kind
not
of
sure what he
broad.
was mentioning there.
hmm.
But in your perusing of all of the random things that are mentioned in the Ashes Discord,
Yeah.
what have you seen and been like, oh, that's really cool?
I definitely have uh taken seriously the desire for more official organized play support so people can feel like, yeah, this is a game worth sticking with, and I can see the road ahead in terms of what I can expect from organized play and the prizes, and just knowing that Plaid Hat is walking the road with us. So I hope to be doing more official events and sponsoring of community events and stuff like that, where if we have enough just backlog of prize supports, it's like we want to use it. And I very much understand where the Ashes community is, and I think pivoting away from the expectation that the organized play kits will be used in stores and starting up local events, maybe it's better to just work with the community as we know it is right now and continue to support that and create ways for people to continue onboarding onto what is succeeding right now. So for that, I'm really thankful for Dijon's work on Ashteki, really giving us the best feasible platform we could have, especially amid COVID. But even just the way people play these games now, Ashteki is a huge gift, and the super thankful to the Shuffle Bus guys for putting on the regular tournaments and really centralizing the competitive community there, having that as a very consistent, reliable, and high quality place to play and talk about competitive Ashes is super useful. So like that definitely doesn't go unnoticed. So I'm hoping we can give back and support the work that's being done in that way by putting the plaid hat stamp of approval on it and getting
Like,
and supporting it with what we're able to do, which is production of prize support and stuff like that. So AshCon was definitely testing the waters of kind of working with those. We use the Ashteki platform. Shuffle Bus streamed the feature matches. So I think I think just cooperation with the passionate community members are out there and doing what we can to best support them is the way to go.
Yeah, that was really cool when Plaid Hat like basically endorsed doing games on Ashteki, because I feel like previously like other companies would be like, if there's something on like Tabletop Simulator, it's like, oh, we don't even know what that is, or it's like if we do acknowledge it, it's like, no, don't play on there.
Yeah,
So,
or like we're not making money off this. Like, why would we?
Yeah,
You know, and like
why would we say anything good about it?
Yeah, I think I speak for everyone in the Ashes community when I say that we're so excited and happy to see Plaid Hat being so like integrated with the community in that way, and like saying like, these efforts that you guys are putting in, like we value this. We value this community effort, and we love that you guys are finding new ways for the game to be played amidst like a very interesting real life situation we're in. So yeah, it's very cool.
Yeah, I mean, these games live and die with their community, and I think it's a big missed opportunity to shut the door on all the passion and effort that goes into supporting them with the community members, and it's really important to acknowledge and support that. And I in terms of sales, I think it does nothing but help raise the water for everybody. The way we have a PDP set up, we want people to continue sticking with the game, and the best way to do that is keep them happy with what works for them and what they want, and then that can only help them expand and invite friends into the community. And it's just really great nurturing the community we have. I love being a part of the Discord.
For sure. I think we're gonna go ahead and start wrapping up here. I know it's getting kind of late for Phil or East Coast, and late for me here too. But one more question before we go, because I think it's a really cool one. Is there anything from future releases or design that might help with the community's new player onboarding difficulties? That's been another kind of hot topic in the community lately. Is like, how do we get new players in to play this game? And precons are only so. Experiences, like they're good at teaching mechanics and introducing a limited scope of cards and everything, but they don't have as much replay value as precons do in other games and so on. So like, is there anything that you can give us, like hints of like what's to come that might be addressing new player onboarding difficulty?
Yeah, Ashes has a couple unique challenges to the new player experience, which you were kind of touching on. The realities of the way precons are structured and the already pretty large card pool we have as a result of how Reborn was executed. It was definitely a big boon for players who were already invested. But yeah, it's a tall order to start playing Ashes and knowing where to start. So new product could support this in several ways. The set I'm working on after the time cycle connects back to the master set in a pretty unique way, I think. So I think those sets will help players be able to play and explore with a smaller collection in a really exciting way. So in that sense, you're kind of able to get more mileage out of your master set, and it will also give you more direction for picking which expansion sets you want to pick after that.
Gotcha.
But as for playing the game, I think there are some really good community resource out there. There's like Impossible Germans, Adventuring Party decks. I think are an exemplary um, example of like how you can get into constructed play with a very clear deck that is tournament worthy.
Yeah.
And it's possible we could do like a new player dueling pack kind of product with dice where it's like, okay, here's some simple decks that are well balanced against each other. But I'm not sure where uh, we stand in that in terms of that being necessarily a successful product.
Mm-hmm.
Just because the Ashes player base is already kind of small, so I don't know if creating a new entry point will necessarily be as successful as just
Continuing
re-supporting the
to,
master set.
yeah,
What we're kind of doing now. So
yeah,
it's a tall order, but it's there's a lot of reward behind it when you do decide to invest in Ashes, and
yeah,
I think just the community attitude and support goes a long way for helping people feel like it's approachable and worth doing. So
yeah,
uh, at the very least, we have that going for us, and if the community stays small, it stays small, and as long as it's big enough, we'll keep it going. So that I think
yeah,
that's endearing in its own sense. A lot of these games really have always relied on having a certain level of continual growth, and what we're doing with PDP is a little bit counter to that, where we just need to have enough, and if
mm-hmm.
everybody stays happy and consistent with that, then we just move along as normal, and that's exciting in its own ways too.
For sure.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nick, thank you so much for taking time out of your week to come on to First Five Live and do this interview. Like, we were really happy that you came on, and this was really, really cool.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me. This was a ton of fun. I love talking about Ashes, and it's cool seeing all the energy around this latest release and all the things to come.
Absolutely. For everyone out there listening, it sounds like there's some really cool news coming from Plaid Hat very soon. So stay tuned, check the Plaid Hat website. Charlotte, keep that F5 key ready. But for now, we're gonna go ahead and call it because it's pretty late. Thanks everyone for tuning in. We had a lot of viewers tonight. That's really cool. This will be going up in audio format on Spotify very shortly, either tomorrow or Saturday, as soon as I can get to it, and you'll be able to listen in your cars and so on. But for tonight, I think we're gonna go ahead and call it quits, and we'll see you next time on First Five Live. Thanks for tuning in, and see you later.
You guys.
So long.